So if you can see now that what I call the new dialogic, coordination, consensus, exchange, is a fairly limited way of understanding what activist issues really are, how they coordinate and communicate, and how they actually engage with each other. How then do we understand what activist dialogue is? How do we move beyond connectivity and connection as a way of understanding activist dialogue? So in closing, I just want to reflect on the idea that if considering activist communication in terms of the new dialogic emphasizes a very specific networking logic of connectivity, and if activist communication is altogether more complex, then we have to change what we mean by dialogue. Okay? And so what Heather Zola and I have proposed is that instead of examining dialogue on the fringes of activist work, okay, looking for consensus or collaboration wherever we can find it, we make it more central, okay, and focus on the dialogic potential of activist contestation, and set contestation up itself as dialogic. Okay, so doing so centers openness and reduces the privilege of consensus. Okay, so openness becomes an altogether more important construct, I think. So that's what Heather Zola and I did in our recent comp theory piece. We tried to develop multiple meanings of openness and instead of just thinking of openness as one specific kind of listening. And so there are 4 meanings of openness in that article that we never really fleshed out very coherently in the piece itself, but they are in there. And so I thought I'd close by just talking about that. So one form of activist openness is openness as deliberation. Okay? And that is openness as a kind of communicative explanation, an attempt to establish difference in the face of presumed unity. Right? Presumed unity in consensus, in that sense, is a dangerous form of discursive closure. Right? So if you are, as an activist, attempting to explain injustice, that is an important form of openness because it actually communicates multiplicity and communicates difference in the face of presumed unity. Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right? Second, we understand openness as a kind of pragmatic caution. And by pragmatic caution in practice, I think the term that we ended up using just sort of as a conceptual shortcut was cautious confrontation or cautious cooperation, right? What this does is prevent co-optation, right? So even if you decide to cooperate, even if you're the transition movement, for example, and you end up lobbying the city council and hoping that they'll work with you, openness in that sense is manifested by exercising caution and not allowing co-optation. Okay, so and in practice that might involve alternating contestation with outright contestation with more collaborative practice. A third meaning of openness is understanding openness as a form of unpredictability. Right? Protests have a dialogic and multivocal character themselves. Okay? They have uncertain outcomes for protesters as well as the frames for the issue itself. Okay? So understanding sort of the outcomes of protest itself as a form of openness. And finally, and I guess most obviously, and this is what people have written more about, is openness as a kind of awareness and visibility of the issues itself. The very existence of the Occupy movement, for example, itself helps create cultural discourses and counter-narratives about the inevitability of financial austerity. And that is a very important kind of openness to have. Again, it's something that prevents discursive closure. So what we're trying to say is that dialogic openness can be engendered by all kinds of communicative practices. Those include debates, discussions, struggles, contestations, not just coordination, collaboration, and exchange. Right? It happens in multiple ways. And activist studies in that sense need to continue to do this work to keep understanding and keep unpacking the kind of radical openness that activist organizing continues to potentialize, but not necessarily actualize.